I'm gonna cover both subjects on the Indianapolis and the big mast, the King's Masts. And you'll have to forgive me. I busted my eardrum about 2 months ago. Yeah. So my doctor says it's going to heal up after a while, but it's rumbling. So you'll have to forgive me. But I'm going to be 98 years old, January 14th. Okay. I'm going to go over quickly with the King's Masts. I'm going to get both subjects, the Indianapolis, but I'm going to start off with the King's Mast. In the first one, the tree had to be 200 feet high to make the King's Mast for the King of England. And the mast went on these ships. These are English ships. And Stroutwater and Portsmouth, that was the main harbor. Stroutwater. That was the main harbor for these big masts. Their tree had to be 200 feet high. Before I go on, after the Revolutionary War, they couldn't find another one of them that was over 200 feet high. But before the United States, I even know where they came from. They came from Norway, in the fjords in Norway. And the story goes there, these English and Spanish people were going up, before Columbus, up in the fjords, they were cutting these big, long logs. And the natives over there could see them every couple of weeks, big, long log, 200 feet long mast, going down to England, to Spain, to Portugal. So one of those natives in Norway, he found an old ship's cannon, and they got it firing. So when the fjord goes into the ocean, they mounted that cannon. And so they went up to see the sea captain a couple of miles up in the fjord, loading with these big masts. And they told the captain, they said, "Guess what? You're not going to England with those big logs this morning." The captain said, "Well, who in the heck's going to stop me?" They said, "We are. We've got a cannon down there 2 miles. If you try to go through there without paying toll, we're going to blow the darn ship apart." The true story, what I'm telling you. I got this out of the library books. And so he had to start to pay toll, but all right, so that was that. So, but when Columbus found the United States, the first mast was found in 1609, and the ship that found it was Henry Hudson's ship. He was coming down from Hudson Bay. The name of the ship is the Half Moon. Everything I'm saying, you can look it up in the library. I remember it verbatim. So in 1609, they saw a great big tree at Penobscot Bay, 200 feet high. Oh my gosh, there's the King's Mast. They needed 180 foot for the mast. They went on these ships. Those masts are 180 foot high. And so they cut it down. The Half Moon did in 1609, took it to England. The next mast they found was at Camden Hills. They found another 200 foot high tree. But after that, they started to find them at Freeport. There's mast roads in Freeport, mast coves. And in Alfred, Maine, there's a mast road. Anybody know about that mast road?
Probably seen it.
Mast road in Alfred, Maine, where these great big masts come down through. And here's the agent making his mark. And the last agent was George Tate. He lived in Stroutwater. Anybody go to that museum in Stroutwater? Well, that's where these big logs was bundled up. And the one who runs that museum is Mrs. Bishop. And that house, oh, here's the Tate house right here. That's where George Tate lives at Stroutwater. You go to that museum. And I owned it. I owned one time a sea captain's house built in 1820 in Elford. I bought it for $3,000, getting off the subject. It was built by a sea captain, Timothy Gary. I bought that for $3,000, 50 acres, a 14-room house, one of these big houses, and a tube and knob wiring, no insulation, wood roof on the house. I owned one of these big houses once in 1950. $3,000. I got everything in the house, the sea captain's table, the horses are in the stables, the chickens are laying eggs. I even got the guy's dog, the player piano's in the way, all the furniture, 2 parlor sets, one of them with a horsehair settee, made out of horsehair settee with brass wheels. I own that. $3,000 I paid for it, 1950, sea captain's house. But anyway, get back to my story, that's another story. But Mrs. Bishop says, "Raymond, do you want to go through this old house?" I says, "Yeah, I'd like to go through it." So I started to go through that old house, and I come to the fireplace, and I says, "What the heck? What's all that smooth wood on the fireplace?" I said, "My old sea captain's house had plane marks on them." All the windows, planes, was all plane marks, my 14-room house. She says, well, this house was built in England. And George Tate had a lot of money, so he had it shipped on a ship. That house was built in England and put up there at Stroutwater. You can go see it tomorrow if you want to. Mm. They come from England all built. So I said, I don't want to go through it. Mm. I don't like that. Mm. I like my old house. Mm-hmm. Some of my boards in the old house on the up and down sawmill, 27 footers, that wide. Mm. The one I own. But anyway, that's off the subject. Getting back to the mast. So the mast was that big. And they were, those wheels are 10 foot high, and they come down there in Alfred, and I made my own wheel, 10 foot high. It was in the paper. They called it the Wonder Wheel. That's me right there with my little wheel I made. Oh, wow. That went onto that wheel. Now, this is 2013. So I was Payeur Realty, and that big wheel was behind my house. If anybody rode by before it burned down, you saw my wheel. Did anybody did? I had it behind the house, that great big wheel. I was going to put it on the highway, but I said it's going to distract people and I'll cause an accident, so I don't want that. So I put the big wheel behind the house, but you could see it as you rode by. That great big wheel right there. And Storyland in New Hampshire, they also had the 10-foot wheels. There they are. They were up to Storyland in the Hermitage. Did anybody go there years ago and go to that museum up there, Storyland? Well, that wheel was there. They went bankrupt, and a guy from Brunswick bought those wheels. But there they are right there. And I found another pair in Webster, New Hampshire, at the museum in Webster, 10-foot wheels. So anyway, so is the agent making that. They were pulled out of the woods with 50 oxen, and I know where they were cut, way up on the Fort Ridge in Shapley. I can take you up where these big trees were cut, where they were loaded on these 6-foot wheels, 6 wheels, and the big log was put on there and hauled out with 50 oxen. Down they came down from on Fort Ridge. And the big wheels come down through Alfred. It took 3 days to go to the ocean with 50 oxen. And they went down the Mast Road, across what is 202 today, on the Bennett Road where my farm was, by the elephant's grave where the elephant's buried. In Alfred, the big wheels went right by there. Down a Mouse Lane, 50 oxen, slowly going. Down a Mouse Lane, they finally hit the Mousam River. No, they couldn't go across the mountain. Turned left, go to West Kennebunk. And then they went down by their big sea captain's houses in Kennebunk. And down by the Wedding Cake House, down by Durrell's Bridge, and threw them in the water in the Kennebunk River. And if you go to Kennebunk Port and you read on the bridge, where you read the plaque, it tells you about the locks up the river, locks. Well, those big logs was thrown above those locks, and those locks, they held the big wheels. And when they needed 3 or 4 of them masts down at Strawberry Bank, they sent a little boat up the Kennebunk River and hauled 2 or 3 of them 180-foot logs down to Strawberry Bank. 100 shiploads a year before 1650 went to England, in New England. 100 shiploads a year, those masts. There they are. And these, when people don't believe me, even Mrs. Williams don't believe me when I talk about the mast. She says, Raymond, that mast road was not for that. So I went to the library and I got all the information right out of the library, whether she believes it or not.